Hey, Dad's gone now, so get out of this house. The inheritance is all mine, and I'm taking this house, so you better just scrape by on your pension. I don't remember raising you to be someone who would say such terrible things. We can't be bothered to take care of a burdensome old person who will need caregiving from now on. We have no use for an old person who can't even do housework. After my husband passed away, this is what my eldest son and his wife told me. While my husband was alive, they often came to visit the family home, but it turns out they were just buttering us up to get the inheritance. I understand, then I'll cut ties with you. I said this to the two of them, who lacked any humanity, and left the house. There, waiting for me with a car, was my younger son. Disgusted with his brother and sister-in-law, he had come to pick me up. I wonder how things ended up like this. No, those two are done for. I'm a 62-year-old housewife who lived with her husband. My husband was going to retire in one more year, and recently we had been discussing what to do about our life after retirement. Unlike me, who only finished middle school, my husband was an elite at a major company and now held a very high position, placing us in a well-off category based on income alone. Thanks to that, we were able to raise our two sons without any problems and had no worries about our old age. Also, our son, who turned 30 this year, got married, and it wasn't too far off that we would see our grandchildren's faces in our later life. We spent our days happily while talking about this. I'm home. Excuse us for intruding. Ever since getting married, the eldest son had been visiting the family home quite frequently, and we had managed to get along very well with the eldest son's wife. She was truly polite, and despite the age difference, it felt like talking to a friend, making our relationship feel like that of a real parent and child. But one day, that life suddenly started to fall apart. Hello? I need an ambulance. My husband has collapsed. Please come quickly. It was a holiday, and I was spending it with my husband when he suddenly collapsed. Although my husband had a chronic illness, he hadn't been feeling ill, so it was a real shock. Fortunately, his life was not in danger, but from that day on, I could tell his health was gradually declining. I'm sorry to be a burden, but I'll be okay soon after taking some medicine. Don't worry too much. I don't think it's a burden at all. We have a promise to enjoy our retirement, right? Don't be so down. I'm sure you'll get better. All I could do was encourage my husband, but he gradually became thinner and lost his energy. The eldest son and his wife, worried about him, started coming to the family home more than before, and everyone was concerned about him. Responding to those expectations, my husband didn't fully recover, but gradually got better, which relieved me. Even after my husband's recovery, the frequency of the eldest son and his wife visiting the family home increased. The eldest son and his wife said they were worried about my husband, and at first I felt grateful that they cared about him so much. However, after seeing the couple visit the family home several times, I started to doubt whether they were genuinely concerned about my husband. So, what's your condition like now? Well, it's so-so. They said it's not a good condition and the deterioration is quite rapid, so I won't live much longer. Is that so? What about the inheritance then? After Dad passes away, I was thinking of taking care of Mom, if she's alone. Hey, we don't need to talk about such unlucky things. The eldest son had started asking about my husband's inheritance every time he visited our home. It was indeed an important matter. and not something to be vague about. However, I was getting fed up with the eldest son's attitude, always concerned about the amount of money. But we have to think about the what ifs, right? How much is dad's total estate worth? Exactly, we need to discuss this properly. Savings, life insurance, the value of this house. Can you tell us all the details? Initially, it was just the eldest son talking about the inheritance with my husband, but lately his wife had also started asking about it. They seemed to be positive on the surface, but their eyes sparkled with greed when discussing the inheritance. It was truly uncomfortable seeing them blinded by money. But these were just my feelings, and I couldn't blame them. I wish they wouldn't talk about money when they came to see my husband, but he was quite proactive in discussing the inheritance, so I didn't interfere. Since then, my husband's condition, which I thought was improving, gradually worsened, and he began taking more days off work. That day, too, my husband was feeling ill and stayed home from work when the eldest son and his wife came over. "Dad, are you okay?" "Sort of, just getting by." "I see. Well, rest up today." "We came today because we were worried about Dad, but also, could you lend us some money?" "What?" "There's a lawyer who can help with the inheritance when the time comes. We went to talk to him today, and it seems we have to pay some initial contract fee." I was furious that the eldest son came to talk about this while my husband was sick. We were discussing the inheritance, but there had never been any talk of hiring a lawyer. The eldest son decided on his own and even demanded money, which increasingly irritated me. Afterward, the eldest son kept bringing his wife to our home and found reasons to get money from my husband. By this point, constantly talking about the inheritance and siphoning money from my husband, I started to feel that they only saw him as a source of money. Was this really okay? Just as I was pondering this, another incident occurred. "What? Honey, wait, call an ambulance!" My husband suddenly collapsed and was rushed to the hospital. He was unconscious, and I was in a complete panic throughout. The eldest son and his wife happened to be at home and accompanied us to the hospital, but they remained calm throughout, while I was the only one panicking. During the emergency surgery, I could not hide my agitation. However, the harsh reality we were informed of was that my husband did not survive the surgery. The disease had progressed significantly, but I never thought his time would come so suddenly. I collapsed on my knees and screamed in grief. For a while, I could see nothing around me and could only continue crying. But as my tears dried up, the eldest son and his wife started talking. "So that means all of Dad's inheritance is ours now, right?" We waited quite a bit. "Finally, it's in our hands. Now we don't have to play nice anymore. Finally free." "What?" I was speechless at their acceptance of my husband's death and their refreshed smiles. I doubted my ears, but this was no dream, it was reality. "Wait a minute, what are both of you talking about? Jokes aren't funny right now, you know." "What are you talking about, Mom? You must be happy with the huge inheritance coming, right? But you won't get a single penny." "You don't have to pretend to be sad, you know." "Or are you just sad that we're taking all the inheritance?" I was utterly confused and speechless. What were these two thinking? Certainly, it's natural to talk about the inheritance after my husband's death. My husband had a significant income from a large company, so I understood their interest in the inheritance, but I never expected it to come so soon. What puzzled me was that I wouldn't receive a single penny from the inheritance. They had discussed the inheritance several times before my husband's death and might have been plotting something sinister. Though my mind was disturbed by my husband's recent passing, I couldn't let these two mock his death any longer. Can you explain what's going on? What do you mean I won't get any inheritance? And he just passed away. Don't you feel sad at all? Why would I feel that? We discussed this while Dad was still alive, and it was decided that I would inherit everything. That old nuisance believed us when we said we'd take care of you, Mom. He was easy to fool because he was just an old fool. I had a hunch during my husband's lifetime, but these two indeed saw him only as a source of money. The moment I heard this truth from the two of them, everything inside me turned to anger. What did they think of my husband? I couldn't forgive them, and overwhelmed by the sorrow of losing my husband, the hardship and anger towards the two, I could no longer control myself. Enough with the jokes. Who do you think you are to talk like that? Stop with the pleasantries already. Dad left a will, and this is his will. We have to respect it, right? You loved your husband, right? It's his will after all. Since you could only manage to graduate from middle school, you probably didn't notice, but blame your own incompetence. They showed no signs of apology and sneered as they said this to me. I was at the end of my patience and almost lashed out physically, but I was brought back to my senses by a loud voice calling me from behind. It was my younger son, who had arrived a bit late. I heard about that. I'm sorry I couldn't be there with him at the end. I need to tell you too. The inheritance is all said to be mine. Of course, I'll take the house too, so take care of this old lady, okay? Anyway, since it's all according to Dad's wishes, we're inheriting everything, so don't try to do anything weird, okay? They said this to the newly arrived younger son as well, who was at a loss for words. They explained it to him as they had to me, and the younger son, though filled with anger like me, began to speak to the eldest son calmly. Got it, then do as you please. I'll take Mom with me. Yes, I'll also cut ties with you too. Saying that, I left with my younger son. The eldest son and his wife, who were smirking until the very end, were truly despicable. But now that I was cutting ties with them, they no longer mattered to me. With a mix of emotions swirling in my head, I desperately tried to organize my thoughts as I got into the car with my younger son. Then, with a calm expression, my younger son began to speak. Well, Dad had told me about it, but I didn't think my older brother and his wife would be that terrible. But those two are done for. What? What do you mean by done for? Well, you'll understand in time. Just don't worry too much. People like my brother will get what they deserve. I didn't fully understand what he meant, but it seemed that the inheritance wouldn't just be simply passed on as usual. Indeed, it was infuriating to think that we would just accept losing all of my husband's inheritance to them. So these words from my younger son gave me some hope. However, I was not in a mentally stable state, having just lost my husband. Perhaps sensing my condition, my younger son stopped mentioning the eldest son. The eldest son and his wife did not participate in any of the funeral events at all. Well, since they were only after the money, there was no need to pretend to care about my husband anymore. After the funeral, when my emotions had somewhat settled, the eldest son had already faded from my thoughts. As I was beginning to return to my normal life, I unexpectedly received a call from the eldest son. Hey, What's happening with the inheritance? You tricked me, didn't you? What? Stop playing dumb. There's no inheritance at all. It's impossible that Dad, who was such a saver, didn't have any savings. You must be hiding it somewhere. When I thought I had received a call from the eldest son after a long time, he was furiously accusing me about the inheritance. However, my younger son had warned me that I might receive such a call from the eldest son after the funeral. So I wasn't too surprised by this call itself. There are several things we need to discuss about the inheritance. Could you come to my place at once? Since I had already heard from my younger son, I quickly invited the eldest son and his wife to my younger son's house. Then, in the evening of that day, the two of them arrived at my younger son's house, visibly furious. What's going on? Why is there no cash at all? Where did you hide that old fool's money? They were consistently furious about the absence of my husband's savings. The eldest son thought he would inherit everything, including the house which I had given up. But all he actually inherited was the family home. Don't play dumb. Explain properly. Okay, to put it bluntly, you were tricked, bro. Dad didn't trust you at all. That's the truth. What? Tricked? They looked utterly shocked, which was understandable. They never imagined that they were the ones being deceived by my husband. They had convinced themselves that they had managed to secure all the inheritance by sweet-talking my husband, so this revelation was truly a shock to them. Everything you guys were plotting was already known, and Dad prevented all the inheritance from going to you. I received everything as a gift during his lifetime. What? Don't mess with me. Do you think that's acceptable? Calm down a bit. You still have something called a reserved portion that you can claim, so don't worry. Despite the situation, eldest son's wife, greedy and calm, and the eldest son who lost his composure to such an unexpected event, made me laugh unintentionally. They were truly obsessed with money, which was truly ridiculous. My younger son also seemed to perceive this and continued talking with a slight laugh. There might indeed be a reserved portion, but what are you going to do about the house loan? It's only been a month, so it might not have progressed that far, but the family home still has loan payments remaining. Even if you talk about a reserved portion, your share isn't that much. And you can't offset it, can you? No way. That can't be true. Upon realizing this fact, the eldest son's wife slumped to the ground, while the eldest son didn't say a word and just stood there in shock. Seeing their reaction was truly amusing, and watching them fall from heaven to hell was exhilarating. Because they only saw people as dollar signs, this was the result. The inheritance was important, and my husband always thought about it for the family he would leave behind. However, the ones who let it slip through their hands were the eldest son and his wife themselves. That's the situation, so accept what you've done yourselves. Don't joke around. It's your fault for not managing to wrap things up neatly. You're useless. Of course, with your mother, a middle school graduate, you would be just as stupid. What? You were the one looking forward to inheriting from someone else's parents and even rejoiced when Dad died. You've done things equivalent to a scoundrel. And now you're yelling? Shut up. Don't push your mistake onto me. First of all, it was you who proposed this plan. If we hadn't done such a stupid thing, we would have received the inheritance properly. It's all your fault, you disaster bringer. Whether they resigned themselves to the legal reality or not, the two began to argue. To us, they were both as good as scum, but in the end, it was a blame game. It really reconfirmed that the scum would always be scum no matter what. It would have been interesting to continue watching their argument, but if things heated up further, it could bother the neighbors, so we kicked them out. Until the very end, they didn't apologize, and all that came out of their mouths were selfish statements. My husband in heaven would also think that deciding not to leave any inheritance to such an eldest son and his wife was the right decision. Afterward, their relationship deteriorated rapidly, and it seems they ended up divorcing. Initially, it wasn't about money, and they married out of genuine attraction, but in the end, being possessed by money led to their unhappiness, and I had no sympathy for them. It was all their own doing, and my husband was amazing for realizing the eldest son's intentions and preparing so thoroughly. While being disowned by her real parents already, I just hadn't noticed that both the eldest son and his wife were truly indecent people. As for the eldest son's wife, after the divorce, she seems to be leading a much lower standard of life since she's not working, but perhaps still caught by the lure of money, she's still trying to marry into wealth. As for the eldest son, he struggles to make payments on the loan for the inherited family home and is working hard every month. By the way, I am able to live comfortably, receiving a monthly allowance from my younger son. According to what my younger son told me, the property he inherited from my husband was a considerable amount. But I am not interested in such money. What's important in life is relationships, and money is just a byproduct that follows. Failing to think this way and being caught up in money will ultimately lead to an end like that of my eldest son and his wife.